Today we're gonna make an Italian ciabatta. It's a white bread that's sort of long and flat in appearance, and it sort of resembles a slipper, and that's exactly what it means in Italian. Ciabatta should have a slightly crispy and chewy crust with an airy interior that's full of holes. And in order to provide you guys with some different techniques on my channel, I'm gonna approach making this bread in a different way than I made the focaccia. I'm gonna use a Biga, which is something called a preferment. Let's get it started, and then I'll explain exactly why I'm taking this route.
For this Biga, add 215 grams of warm water to a large mixing bowl. If you need volume or ounce measurements, take a look in the description box below. Now add 1 gram of active dry yeast. That's about 1/8 teaspoon. Let the yeast bloom for a few minutes. Give it a quick stir, then add 285 grams of all-purpose flour. Use a fork to begin incorporating all of the ingredients together. And then once you have a nice shaggy dough, you can switch over to your hands. Then pinch and fold and press all of those ingredients together until you have a nice homogeneous dough. Now both the Biga and the ciabatta have a 75% hydration, so the dough is going to be really sticky. Just don't let that bother you. And a dough scraper like this works really well at removing any of it that's stuck to your hands after mixing or folding the dough. Cover the bowl with some plastic film or something like this nifty vinyl cover that my wife made for me. Pretty cool, huh? Now, let the Biga rest and ferment at room temperature for about 12 hours.
I don't want to bore you with too many details, but a preferment helps improve bread dough in many ways, and a lot of it has to do with the acids that are created during the fermentation process. These acids help to strengthen the gluten structure in the dough. Acids, along with the esters, add wonderful flavor and aroma in your bread. They lower the pH, which improves the longevity of your finished product, and preferments dramatically shorten the fermentation time, thus kind of speeding up the process of making a bread that would otherwise take a day or two. So now that you know a little bit more about why I'm using a Biga, let's go ahead and make some dough with it. All right, real quick, this is what a Biga will look like after 12 hours of fermentation at room temperature. It's tripled in size, it's super gaseous, lots of bubbles and dimples everywhere. It almost looks like it's gonna collapse. This is what you want. Now grab half of this Biga and you're gonna make a ciabatta with it.
Okay, for that ciabatta dough, add 187 grams of warm water to another large mixing bowl. Then add 2 grams of active dry yeast. That's about 1/4 teaspoon. Let the yeast bloom for a few minutes, then add half of your Biga. The total weight should be 250 grams. Now, I had some left over from a previous batch, so I'm gonna use that instead. Any Biga that you have can be punched down and consolidated into a smaller container and stored in your fridge for a few days. Just make sure that you leave enough room for it to rise. Okay, add 250 grams of all-purpose flour to the bowl, followed up by 8 grams of extra virgin olive oil and 10 grams of fine sea salt. You can use kosher salt instead, but just measure it by weight instead of volume since the size of the granules are different. Using your hands, aggressively pinch, fold, and push all of the ingredients together. The most important thing here is that you try to evenly incorporate the Biga throughout the ciabatta dough. It'll get sort of shaggy in appearance at first, but the dough will become wet and very sticky. I'd mentioned earlier in this video that it's a 75% hydration dough, so don't be alarmed at how difficult it might seem to work with it. The steps I take in this video will reduce the frustration, I promise. Once you have a homogeneous dough, scrape any of it that's stuck to your hands and place it back into the bowl. Then cover it tightly and let the dough rest for 10 minutes so the flour can properly hydrate. When it's time, unwrap the bowl and working around the perimeter, grab some of the dough from underneath, lift up, and stretch it until the dough resists. Then fold it over onto itself and press down a bit to secure the dough in place. If it's really sticking to you, just submerge your hand in some water, then continue the folding process. That should do the trick. Repeat the process 4 or 5 more times until you've completed a full turn. Carefully pick the dough ball up and turn it so that the seams you created when folding are tucked underneath. Cover the bowl back up and let the dough rest for 15 to 20 minutes, then repeat the folding and resting process 3 or 4 more times.
All right, I have folded this 3 times. I'm gonna do it once more. You can see the dough has risen a little bit. I'm gonna go in with a wet hand. Do this once more. It's okay that it's risen, no problem there. I just want to complete one more fold just to give the dough a little bit more, I guess, tension. just like that. Okay, now I'm gonna transfer this to a lightly greased bowl, just like this. And if your hands are wet enough, the dough won't stick to your hands. Should be good to go. There, good to go. Now we're just gonna slip this cover back on and let the dough continue rising for another hour or so until it's completely doubled in size.
Okay, dust your counter with some flour and make sure to give yourself a decently sized work area because you're gonna need it when working with this ciabatta dough. Carefully turn the dough out onto your counter, making sure not to tear or degas it on its way out of the bowl. A dough scraper with rounded corners is the perfect tool to use here. They only cost a couple bucks, and this type of scraper is totally worth its weight in gold. Now, generously flour the top of the dough. I have this tiny little sifter that works really well for this task, but you can use your hands too. Then grab a dough scraper or a long knife and cut the ciabatta dough in half. Feel free to sprinkle some more flour where you're cutting if the dough wants to stick to your hands or the utensil. Just make sure that you completely separate the dough into two distinct pieces. Grab 2 pieces of parchment paper and flour each one. I usually cut a 12 by 16 inch piece into 2 8 by 12 inch pieces. Use 2 dough scrapers or a pair of spatulas and with some confidence, scoop the dough up and transfer it to the parchment. Now you don't have to worry about handling the dough anymore until it comes out of the oven. Reshape your dough if needed, preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 232 Celsius, cover the dough with a damp cloth and let it rest for 30 minutes. A few minutes before baking, preheat a pan in the bottom of your oven, then add about a cup of boiling water to it. Close your oven door and let the steam build up for a minute or so. You can also spritz the dough with some water before baking like I'm doing here. These 2 steps will help your dough expand and give it more aeration inside, while also contributing to a crispier crust. Now grab a peel or a sheet pan and use it to launch the ciabatta doughs along with the parchment paper into the oven and bake them for about 20 to 25 minutes.
Oh, I think we have 2 winners here. Ooh. Nice and crispy. All right, here's number 2. So I'm gonna let these guys cool off on a rack. I don't know, maybe for 10 minutes or so. And then we'll cut one open and take a look at the inside. Sound good? All right. All right, I'm just gonna cut a little bit of an end off here. You guys think? Pretty good, huh? Not too shabby. It's a little softer. It softened up while it rested, but I try a little extra virgin olive oil. Crust is definitely chewy. It's got really good flavor. A little bit of a tang from that additional fermentation from the Biga. It's really good. Soft on the interior. If there's one thing that I wish were better, is that the crust was a little firmer, but it's cool. This is a really good ciabatta. You should try this recipe. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Check out some of my other videos, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks. Appreciate you watching. I think I'm gonna make a sandwich.